In the late Roman Republic, the rich and powerful were obsessed with one thing: getting more power. With all the corruption and infighting, it seemed like Rome was destined for decline. But that's when a new kind of Roman started to emerge: ambitious, energetic, and relentless. And this new breed would produce two giants, two men whose rivalry would shape Rome forever. But today we meet the first of these giants. We are going to go back almost 200 years to see how a young man born into obscurity seized control of Rome and became its most powerful magistrate, a position that would set him up for greatness or doom. Our story begins in the year 133 BC, right in the middle of the late Roman Republic, a period of about 200 years between the end of the Macedonian Wars and the beginning of the empire. It was an age of great troubles and also great ambitions. The Republic had grown huge, but now its size was causing problems. Its diverse regions and far-flung provinces were hard to govern and harder to defend. Meanwhile, in the late Republic, the rich and powerful were obsessed with just one thing: getting more power. This led to lots of corruption and even more infighting. And so, by the time our story starts, Rome was already looking pretty unstable. And yet some saw an opportunity in all this chaos. These were the new breed of Romans: ambitious, energetic, and relentless. They were often called populars, which literally means people's man, but actually means politician who supports the common people. That's what they wanted to be called anyway. And the first of these new breed of Romans was Gaius Marius. There isn't much documentation about Marius's early life. Most of what we know comes from the writings of Plutarch and Sulla, who both wrote at least 1,000 years after Marius lived. So while we can't be 100% sure if every detail is true, most scholars agree that Marius was born in the Italian countryside in 157 BC. His father was a small landowner, and when he died, he left Marius and his brothers a modest inheritance. This made Marius technically a member of the equestrian class, the second highest social class in Roman society after the Senate. But financially, he wasn't that different from a peasant. He owned a couple of farms and some slaves, and that was it. So when Marius decided to move to Rome and pursue politics, he didn't have much money, and he certainly wasn't well connected. In fact, he probably didn't even know anyone in the Senate. This meant that if he wanted to get ahead, he wouldn't be able to rely on his family connections or wealth. Instead, he would have to make a name for himself. And he would do this in the military. The way the Roman political system worked, a man could get a lot of attention very quickly by getting a successful military command. So that's what Marius did. He campaigned in various parts of the Republic, mostly in the province of Hispania. This is where he got the nickname Marius the Great. Historians aren't exactly sure what he accomplished during these campaigns, but they do know that he was successful. After a few years of campaigning, he returned to Rome a local hero, and this set him up for the next phase of his career. You see, when a Roman went on a military campaign, there were three possible outcomes. You could win a big victory and earn lots of glory. You could lose badly and earn lots of shame. Or you could just come back home without making any lasting impact whatsoever. Marius had done something quite rare. He'd managed to find the perfect middle ground. He hadn't lost any battles, but he hadn't really won any either. This meant he was eligible for one of the highest positions in Roman politics, the consulship. As a consul, he would be in charge of running the Republic for 1 year, alongside another consul. It was a prestigious job with lots of responsibilities, but it was also very dangerous, because it came with the expectation that you would lead Rome into war. Now, normally, you needed to be a senator to become consul, but the rules were changed for Marius. It wasn't even the first time. In fact, he was the third consul in a row who wasn't a senator. This trend shows how volatile politics were in late Republican Rome. But it also shows how respected Marius was by his peers. Anyway, in 119 BC, Marius was elected consul. That same year, he appointed Lucius Cornelius Sulla as his subordinate in the consulship. If you've been watching this series since episode 1, then you might recognize that name. That's right. We're finally starting to see the two greatest rivals in Roman history. This was the first time they worked together, but it wouldn't be the last. Over the course of their careers, they served together in 3 different consulships. What they accomplished during their first term as consuls is not very important to our story. What is important is that they got another consulship the following year. Now, this was unheard of at the time. No one had ever held the consulship for 2 years in a row. The position was supposed to be temporary, but Marius and Sulla had convinced the other magistrates to let them serve another year. Now, you might be wondering why they wanted to do this. It is because the previous year they had been appointed consuls to deal with a crisis in the province of Asia Minor. Rome had gone to war against the kingdom of Pontus, and things were not going well. So Marius and Sulla asked to be appointed commanders of the army instead of consuls. This was agreed upon, and Marius and Sulla marched their armies across Italy to meet the Pontic threat. There, they met another Roman general named Archimedes, who was doing a terrible job. Marius and Sulla defeated him. But their victory led to a disagreement over credit. Archimedes claimed he should get all the glory, because he was older and more experienced than Marius and Sulla. But Marius argued that he and Sulla were the real heroes because they had saved the Republic from defeat. Anyway, while all this was going on, Rome was being taken over by a group of aristocrats led by a man named Lucius Cornelius Cinna. Why? Well, in 118 BC, it was the turn of the Senate to appoint consuls, but Marius and Sulla weren't finished campaigning, so they refused to give up their commands. The Senate didn't like this, so they appointed a new consul, Lucius Cornelius Cinna. But he was actually more radical than the Senate. He took advantage of his authority as consul to start undermining Marius and Sulla. For example, he took control of the public treasury and stopped sending money to Marius and Sulla's armies. He also attempted to end their consulships early so that new elections could be held. So what did Marius and Sulla do? They marched their armies on Rome itself. It was the first time ever that Roman generals had brought their armies into the city. Cinna tried to resist, but in the end, Marius and Sulla forced him to flee, and with that Marius's political career took off. He was appointed consul again in 117 BC, but this wasn't the high point of his career. The pinnacle of his political success would come in the next chapter. If you want to find out how many times Marius would be appointed consul, you'll have to stay tuned. But if you want to hear more about ancient Rome right now, then I recommend checking out my podcast. Thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Bye.